This great Hollywood director is best known for Bond, James Bond. He started his career in England and worked his way up to second unit director with George Lazenby on Her Majesty's Secret Service, Marlon Brando and Christopher Reeve on Superman, and Roger Moore on The Wild Geese. But he finally became a director when legendary producer Cubby Broccoli asked him to helm for Your Eyes Only. Since then, he's directed the most Bond films with a total of 5 and earned the franchise close to $1 billion worldwide.
I'm John Glen. Welcome to my home near Henley-on-Thames in Oxfordshire, United Kingdom. It's been a great pleasure working and living in this area, the home of Pinewood Studios, and Oxfordshire, which of course is the location for many of the Bond movies. And welcome to Hollywood's best film directors. I grew up in Sunbury-on-Thames in Middlesex, which is about 25 miles from London. And my parents, Lucy and Robert. Robert was a tool maker, an engineer. Spent quite a good deal abroad in his earlier career, working out in Africa on the mines. Funnily enough, during the First World War, my mother did some work in a munitions factory. She was a young girl, and I guess she was born around about the turn of the century. And she remembers Queen Victoria, and she had a great sense of humour. And during the Second World War, she again got to work in a munitions factory and was an inspector. I had 3 sisters, one of which is still surviving, Margaret. She's 84. I went to school at the local elementary school, Kennington Manor, and this was during the war, Second World War. And in 1939, when war broke out, I was 7 years of age, and it rather interrupted my education, if you like, although I learned a lot about other things, watching bombs drop, and I always remember my father saying, no German's going to get me out of my bed. And about a couple of days later, when the bombs started falling, he said, follow me, and we dived downstairs into the coal cellar, where my sisters were already hiding, and with my mother. And this was like a nightly occurrence. The sirens would go and we would shelter, although it was only a staircase that was protecting us. But we had a few near misses. That's the way it was. There was a movie club at the local cinema, which was Ashford, and we used to go there, 4 or 5 kids, on a Saturday morning, and it was really audience participation. You know, if it was a Robin Hood film, you know, that some bright spark would have a bow and arrow in the audience and fire arrows at the screen. It was kind of a bit rough, shall we say, and the glasses and bottles used to roll down the aisle, you know, because of the angle, the seats. You get pelted with various objects during the course of the screening, but it was great fun, and we all enjoyed it, and we hardly ever missed a Saturday. Well, I joined the Sea Cadets in about 1944-45, and one of the boys there was just leaving. He was a bit older than me, and he was just leaving his current job, which was messenger at Nettlefield Studios. And he said to me that he was going to leave to go into the camera department. And I thought, well, this is a good opportunity. So I cycled over to Nettlefold Studios and applied for the job as messenger boy. And the commissionaire took one look at me and he said, no, you're too big for the uniform. But he said, why don't you go over to Shepperton Studios, which was about 4 or 5 miles away. So I cycled over to Shepperton Studios, and this commissioner, a very kind commissioner, had phoned ahead, and they took down my details, my address. There was no we didn't have telephones then. And about 3 or 4 weeks later, I had a letter to come for an interview. And I went for the interview, and I was successful. And I suddenly found myself one of 25 messenger boys working for Sir Alexander Corder at Shepperton Studios. Suddenly I got a phone call from Pinewood, and it was Peter Hunt on the phone, and he'd got the break to direct on Her Majesty's Secret Service, and he had an extensive second unit working in Switzerland on the snow scenes, except that it hadn't snowed. Off I go to Pinewood Studios and went on the set. All a big new experience for me. Diana Rigg was being directed by Peter, and as soon as he got a break, he came over to me and he opened up the script, showed me the Bob Run sequence, and he said, "Read that and let me know what you think." So he came back after the next shot. He said, what do you feel about it? I said, well, it's a fantastic opportunity. So on the Monday, I found myself flying to Switzerland, and Peter came out and he showed me the Bob Run and introduced me to the crew. So I spent about 3 weeks doing the sequence. After Her Majesty's Secret Service, I was working on doing second unit directing and editing on quite a number of, well-known films, and I began to build quite a reputation. And I found myself in Paris working for Louis Gilbert, who'd previously directed a Bond movie. While we were editing his film in Paris, he said to me, "Oh, I'm going to have lunch with Cubby Broccoli today." When he came back, he said, "Oh, he wants me to direct The Spy Who Loved Me, and he wants you to do some of the action." The parachute jump was such a huge success, I cannot tell you. And for the next few weeks, everyone wanted to see this stunt. And we had royalty down. We had Prince Charles came and saw it. He wanted to see it 3 times. King of Romania came down. Roger Moore brought a lot of his friends down. And there was this wonderful feeling. I didn't realize at that time that eventually I would inherit, the Bond directorship, if you like. But Cubby Broccoli, obviously, it's marked me down from that point for the future. Spy Who Loved Me, it was a great success, and we then went on to shoot Moonraker. After Moonraker, there was a pause. Cubby went back to America and what have you, and I forgot what I had been doing. I did some other film, and then I got a call if I was available to come down and have lunch at Pinewood. Cubby was coming back with his family. We had a very pleasant lunch, and Cubby said, "Would you like to come back to the office?" And I hesitated. I suppose it hit me. I was beginning to suspect something was up. Cubby said, "What would you say to directing the next James Bond film?" But I stood there like a stunned mullet, I think, for a few seconds. It was such a surprise, really. And Cubby said, "Well, if you want time to think about it." I said, No, I don't need any time to think about it. I'd love to do it.
Action!
I suppose Christopher Columbus, The Discovery, was a very unusual film in a lot of ways. Alexander Solkin had promoted it at Cannes. He'd hired a yacht and helicopters and God knows what, and Timothy Dalton was going to play the lead at this time. And he spent about $5 million, I think, on the promotion of the upcoming film. Sadly, as we approached the shooting date, everyone started dropping out. The director dropped out. Timothy Dalton dropped out. Suddenly, slavery became a very bad word in America, and the talk went round that Christopher Columbus introduced slavery to America, and it was just bad publicity generated. Instead of this wonderful event, the 500 years, of the discovery of America. It became a non-event, and the Solkins had invested so much money in this project. I was just finished Ace's Iron Eagle 3, I think it was, and I was in Los Angeles, and I had a call from Solkin and asked me would I be interested, and I discussed it with my agent, and we agreed that it was a subject that we would like to do. Later on, Alexander, who was a great showman and a very nice man, he felt that the cast needed beefing up a bit, and we managed to get Marlon Brando. And having got Marlon Brando, we managed to get Tom Selleck in the cast, which gave us a bit more prestige in the above the credits. I think Marlon Brando's, it's a dream come true to actually direct a man like Brando. And I'd heard all the stories and what have you, and I was a little bit fearful, I must admit. But when I met him, actually, he was the most charming man. And he said, John, he said, the only reason I'm doing this film is to pay the lawyer's fees for my children's court case. And I felt really sorry for him, and he was a very genuine man. Completely, I didn't realise the power of the publicity that he generated. I mean, we used to have hordes of cameramen and photographers hounding us all the time. Every time he was on the set, you know, every building around had photographers on the roof. He really was the most famous actor, and was pursued relentlessly by the paparazzi. The pre-production process on a Bond film is quite extraordinary, really, because in all my films, all we had was a short story by Ian Fleming. So writers, Dick Maybaum and Michael Wilson, would come in and they'd have a blank sheet of paper virtually, and we'd start to actually write the film, write the scenario. At the same time, we were doing the location records. You know, we would say, oh, we haven't been to Greece before, we should try Greece. So we go on an extensive reconnaissance of Greece, just 3 or 4 of us, Michael, myself, Cubby came on one, and we'd explore the possibilities. And one of the places we saw was Corfu, which we liked very much. And then we looked at some other locations in Greece, and there was the Meteoros with the monasteries perched on top of these strange-looking rocks. And I thought, well, that sounds like Bond, James Bond. The Acropolis we didn't use because it was virtually impossible to film there. The pollution was terrible, so that, you know, it never looked clear. It was always a very polluted city, Athens, or it was then. And the Acropolis, of course, is a World Heritage Site, and you can't really film it. You know, I mean, you'd almost be better off building it yourself if you could do that. But so we decided on Greece.
And action! Out of my way, James.
Monasteries was the key. So we did a deal with the head of the church in Athens to give us use of these monasteries. And of course, when we came down to shoot there, the local monks wouldn't recognise that, and the money we'd paid in Athens never got to them, and they weren't going to cooperate.
There are 2 monks there who don't want us to film.
So in the end, we did have to build our own monastery on one of the rocks. And Peter Lamont did it really in a very short space of time.
Climb the other side, right?
Yes.
I've got to go around the other side.
No, you've got to find that right-hand side.
In the preparation, you know, we often have military hardware. And there are private companies that maintain and store tanks and aircraft and all kinds of things. So, you know, these facilities are about. The big problem usually is our vehicles and that aren't terribly reliable, and they tend to. The first thing that happens is they haven't got any petrol in the tank. You know, that's page one. You know, you hire the vehicle and they're too mean to fill it up with petrol. So you learn that very quickly. Secondly, they're in very poor mechanical condition. You know, when you make a James Bond film, the atmosphere on the set is very important. I didn't want everyone to be uptight about anything on the movie, so we tried to keep a very relaxed atmosphere. And I wasn't the first to do this by any means. I mean, I think Lewis Gilbert did this with Roger Moore on the earlier films. We always had a very jokey kind of atmosphere.
And action. Cut.
I'd worked with Roger on many films doing action sequences, editing, second unit directing, and we'd had, you know, I've worked with him quite closely over the years. So you know, in a way, it was natural when I got the top job and Roger came to meet me in Corfu. There was a bit of an atmosphere initially, because there's a big difference between being the main director on a movie and being the action director. Roger was a little nervous about what I would do with his performance, you know. But after a few days of shooting and what have you, he was fantastic. And he really supported me all the way through the movie.
Are you talking sex, you two, because you're being recorded?
I mean, there are occasions, you know, when you have a discussion with the leading actor about his interpretation of the role. And generally this is thrashed out before you start shooting and when you have discussions about the script.
Right, we're running. Okay, and you start, and action.
Well, what are you waiting for? Get in!
One occasion that comes to mind, the scene where Locke is in the Mercedes balancing precariously on the cliff in Greece. And the scene was written for Bond to kick the car off the cliff. This is a man that's killed one of his best friends in Cortina. And I argue with Roger that, you know, this is what he deserved, and it showed the ruthless side of Bond. Whereas Roger wanted to take a rather more child-friendly approach, if you like, and it was a question of this little emblem, the dove emblem. He was going to toss that in, and the weight of the tiny little emblem would overbalance the car. That was another way to look at it, but and in the event, I kind of did it both ways. But I convinced Roger, I think, that he had to take the right approach, considering the circumstances, and kick the car over with passion, you know. And I think it worked very well in the film in the end. Well, in View to a Kill, for instance, we had the most beautiful girl in Tanya Roberts. She was gorgeous. And there were a couple of occasions which come to mind. When I first met her, I said to her, you know, she had these most beautiful turquoisey blue eyes, absolutely fantastic. And first thing I said to her was, when she came up to me, was I looked into her eyes and I said, "Are they real?" And she clutched her breast and said, "Of course they are," which I thought was funny. Another occasion with Tanya Roberts, we were working on the mine sequence at Ambley, and Roger came up to me laughing his head off, and he said, "You're going to have to go and sort Tanya out. She's refusing to wear the hard hat in the mine." And he tried to talk her into it, but he failed. So I go into her dressing room and she's virtually in tears, and she's got this hard hat. She said, "I can't wear this through 6 pages of dialogue." So I said, "I'm sure, Tanya, you will look very becoming with a hard hat on." I said, "Everyone else in the mine is wearing one. You have to wear one." And after a great deal of toing and froing, she got the hard hat on, but she wasn't very happy about it. No, on the first day of shooting with Marlon Brando, we had him for 20 days. I think it was for $5 million. So time was, you know, of an essence. As far as I was concerned, I needed to get the maximum amount of work out of Marlon in those 20 days. And I daren't go over. If he went over, the excesses we'd have to pay would be extraordinary. So the first morning, he didn't turn up at all. I got back to the hotel that evening, and I got a call from Tom Selleck. Wants to see me. And Tom said, "Look, I love your work, and I've been looking forward to working with you, but if Marlon Brando is not going to be in the scene that we shot that day, if he's not going to be in the scene, I'm not doing this film, because that's the only reason I did the film, was because of Marlon Brando." So I said to him, "Well, Tom, you know, you're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%. It's been wonderful working with you," and played it that way. Anyway, the next day, Marlon Brando turns up, and then Tom Selleck turned up, and we kind of redid the separate scenes. I didn't lose any time, really, just a very short space of time. And we completed the scene, and he was as good as gold after that. He turned up every day, did everything I asked him to do. It took me a little while to realise that he had a kind of a sound receiver in his ear, rather like a hearing aid in miniature, and he was receiving the lines wireless from his assistant next door. He was feeding him the lines. So consequently, there were kind of delays between him receiving the lines and him delivering the lines. And it took me a couple of takes to realise what was happening.
Action!
Yeah, I think of all the films, the 5 Bond films that I directed, and my favourite is probably Octopussy. It was the second film that I directed on the Bond series, and it I had a great deal to do with the construction of the story and designed the action, and I just found it very satisfying. Octopussy was fun because it had a jungle setting, and India was beautiful. I loved Udaipur, where we shot the film. There were 3 palaces there that we were able to use. They were all in various states of disrepair when we arrived. One of them was converted into a hotel while we were there, and it's become like a 5-star hotel now. There was the Lake Palace Hotel we used to put the crew in, and there was the Summer Palace up on the mountain, which again was in disrepair. And then there was another palace on the lake, which we resurrected for the landing of the Love Boat when the girls come in. Absolutely beautiful. It was an artificial lake. And originally it had been a river running through, and below the dam was the most wonderful jungle you've ever seen, because it was fed with the water that was leaking out of the lake, and it had all these exotic plants, and it was part of another palace, and it was really like a Jungle Book scenario, and very interesting. And we had an elephant hunt there. You probably remember the tiger sequence in there where Roger says, "Sit." And that was Barbara Wodehouse, who was quite famous on American television for teaching people how to train their dogs. And she was very, very popular. And Roger came back with this idea of sit. And we had to find a tiger. They're pretty rare in India, as you can imagine. And we attended a reception by the Maharaja, and as I came in, the first thing I saw was a stuffed tiger. And the first thing I said to him was, "Can I borrow your stuffed tiger?" And we put it in a wheelbarrow and ran it through the undergrowth, and it looked very realistic. It's very gratifying sometimes when the fans come up to you and say, you know, how much they've enjoyed one of your films. And they're not always the same film. I think people have their own favourites with Bond films. That's their strength in a way.
You can call Mr. Timothy Stoyan.
I think that, from my point of view, I think to give people pleasure is the most wonderful thing. And I can remember years ago going to see a Dustin Hoffman film in the Empire Leicester Square, and I was at the back, and I looked round, and Dustin Hoffman was standing at the back, listening to the audience, the laughter and what have you, to get the feedback. And it's the same with me. I used to, watch the audience when I ran a film. I used to watch my audience to see what appealed to them, what made them laugh. I hope there is a style in my films, but generally, what I always tried to do was to create a terrifically suspenseful action sequence, followed by a funny line or a funny situation, which made the audience release and laugh. And to me, when that works, that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. When I was asked to direct For Your Eyes Only, it was such a thrill, and the last thing I thought about was the money, quite honestly. I just was keen to put my stamp on the Bond series. I was a great fan, I just loved it. I couldn't believe my luck to get that job. I worked very hard and had a lot of fun doing it, and every day went by like in seconds. I would start work about 4:30 in the morning, and I'd be in the cutting room until 10 at night, but time didn't seem to mean anything. I never felt tired. You only feel tired when you stop at the end of the movie and you realise what it's taken out of you, but it's a great pleasure for everyone.